Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
In his very famous book, The Sabbath, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel tells the story that appears in the Talmud about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rabbi Eliezer, who have to flee and live in a cave. They live in a cave with their sand up to their necks, and they study Torah all day and all night. Heaven. For them it was, actually, for some, maybe not with the sand part of things. Anyway, after the 13 years in the cave, a divine voice tells them to come out, and they emerge from the cave and they destroy everything with their eyes. Everything they see, they basically burn it. Why? Because they've been living in what they perceive as the essence of eternal life, essentially studying Torah, and their interaction with the real world doesn't go so well. They're self-righteous. They have a lot of judgment, and the divine voice says to them basically, did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Like, was it all what it was all for? So they're sent back into the cave. Heaven, right? They get another period of time in the cave, and the divine voice invites them out again. And everywhere Rabbi Eliezer would look, the sun, he would strike it, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would heal it. So there's some different thing that happens in the interaction. And then Rabbi Shimon says to his son Rabbi Eliezer, my son, you and I would suffice for the entire world, meaning if you destroy, I'll heal, and that would be good enough, right? And as the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle and running at twilight. And they said to him, why do you have these? Why do you have the myrtle? And he said to them, Kavod Shabbat, in honor of Shabbat. And they said to him, well, let one suffice. Why do you need 2? One bunch of myrtle is enough. And he answered them, one is corresponding to remember the Shabbat day to keep it holy, and one is corresponding to observe the Shabbat day to keep it holy, which are the 2 versions of the 10 commandments that appear, one in the book of Exodus and one in the book of Deuteronomy. And Rabbi Shimon said to his son, see how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel, and their minds were put at ease. So most of us have learned, for those who are familiar with this story, I think most of us get to the point where, in the story where Rabbi Eliezer fires with his eyes and burns and Rabbi Shimon heals, and then we forget the epilogue to this story, which is what Rabbi Heschel is most interested in. He says the most baffling moment of the story comes at the end. After spending 12 years in the cave in study and prayer, the 2 saints persisted in their condemnation of all worldly activities. And having been reproved by the heavenly voice, and having spent 12 more penitential months in the cave, the father was cured of his world negation. Essentially, Rabbi Shimon comes to the understanding that actually there's something to be redeemed about this world. It's okay. And the son, however, didn't make peace with it. But until they saw the old man, things didn't kind of ratchet it up a notch. And he says the sight of the old man holding the 2 bundles of myrtle in honor of Shabbat, and that sight gave both of them tranquility of spirit. What was the symbolic significance of that sight? Why did it indicate a solution to the tragic problem of civilization, which is that it's worldly, it's temporal, it's not eternal? And Heschel continues, Rabbi Shimon's doctrine was there is only heaven and nothing else. But heaven contradicted him, the divine voice contradicted him and said, there is heaven and everything else. It was not until Rabbi Shimon and his son came out of the cave at the end of their second period of retreat that their minds were reconciled to the idea that the world this side of heaven is worth working with. What caused the change of mind, asked Heschel. It was the old man, symbolizing the people of Israel who went out to meet Shabbat with myrtles in his hand as if the Sabbath were a bride. To Rabbi Shimon, spiritual life was the highest goal and time for the sake of eternity. His conclusive comfort was, in spite of all dedication to temporal things, there was a destiny that would save the people of Israel, a commitment deeper than all interests, the commitment to Shabbat. This, then, he says, is the answer to the problem of civilization. Not to flee from the realm of space, to work the things of space, but to be in love with eternity. Things are our tools. Eternity, the Shabbat, is our mate. Israel is engaged in eternity. Even if they dedicate 6 days of the week to worldly pursuits, their soul is claimed by the seventh day, which is eternity. This day that we are welcoming in now. And I love the fact that Heschel kind of puts all the emphasis on the story about the moment of that myrtle, that man, old man, holding the myrtle, saying what reminds us of what eternity is Shabbat. But we actually have to live in this world. We actually have no choice. Most of us aren't going to live in a cave, certainly not filled with sand to our necks, even if we wouldn't mind some sand on the beach every now and then. And that teaching that Shabbat is our taste of eternity, our taste of heaven, and that it is what we long for at all times, but we have to live in this world as it is, but what lets us survive in the world as it is, what reminds us to long is this day when we pull away from civilization as is to what it could be. Then we shut off certain stories that we rejuvenate to remind ourselves despite the challenges in our world, and there are many and they are large. But a true life, a religious life, is not without eternity. It's not without that longing. And interestingly enough, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King also speaks to this notion of eternity. When he was installed as the pastor of Dexter Baptist Church in 1954, he gave a sermon called The Transformative Nonconformist. And this is what he said, obviously to a Christian audience. Today we stand on the brink of moral and physical destruction, and the great need of the hour is sincere nonconformist. Men who will stand up amid a world of materialism and treat all men, this is obviously written in the 50s, so it wouldn't have included women at that time, as brothers. Men who will stand up in a world that attempts to solve its problems by war and declare that he who lives by the sword will die by the sword. Who this afternoon will go away with the determination not to be a slave to the crowd and not to bow to the desires of the mob? Remember, Christian friends, we are now in the colony of time, but our ultimate allegiance is to the empire of eternity. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. Shabbat is a non-conforming time. It's a day to be countercultural. It's a day to touch eternity, and it's a day to remind us that we can push against the mob, that we can push against the violence, that we can push against the hatred, that we can affirm love and peace and possibility and hope. And if these two great giants who lived very, very difficult lives, particularly at their beginnings, could say that was true and could taste eternity, perhaps we can too.